And welcome to this edition of the Native News Update. On this Monday, November 5th, I am the host for today's program, Paul DeMain, and many of the stories we read here can also be found on our website, IndianCountryNews.com, and here are some of those news stories. Hunters participating in Minnesota's wolf hunt found the animals to be elusive on day one. A total of 3,600 licenses were issued for the early wolf season, which started last weekend. By that evening, 32 wolves were killed. But the other noticeable thing is that tribal lands throughout northern Minnesota are off limits to wolf hunters, which, again, all opened last Saturday. All of Minnesota's Chippewa bands have banned wolf hunting and trapping on tribal lands. The affected reservations include Red Lake, White Earth, Boys Fort, Grand Portage, Leech Lake, Fond du Lac, and the Mille Lacs Ojibwe tribes, and they're going to enforce that ban on land they own or that's in federal trust status. Not all tribal lands are posted, and the DNR says the best source of information is your county plat maps. Flags across the Navajo Nation were flying at half-staff last week in honor of Navajo code talker George Smith, who passed away at the age of 90. Navajo President Ben Shelley said the tribe's thoughts and prayers are with Smith's family. Born in Mariano Lake, New Mexico, Smith went to school in Crown Point and Fort Wingate. Smith and his brothers both enlisted with the U.S. Marines in 1943. They were trained as code talkers and were assigned to separate units. Smith served with the 2nd Division in Saipan, Okinawa, and elsewhere. He received the Victory Medal as well as the Congressional Silver Medal for his role as a code talker. Burial with full military honors was this last weekend at the Rehoboth Cemetery. Members of the Oglala Sioux tribe will be finally able to see the latest Hollywood blockbuster movies without leaving the Pine Ridge Reservation. The reservation's first movie theater opened November 2nd after 3 years of planning and construction. Previously, residents of the reservation who wanted to see a movie in the theater had to travel to nearby towns like Martin or Gordon, Nebraska, a difficult endeavor for those who didn't have reliable transportation. Last week, residents are going to be able to travel to Nupa Theater in Kyle to see two first-run flicks, Pitch Perfect and Paranormal Activity 4. The word Nupa means two in Lakota. Owners say the theater will offer some much-needed source of entertainment on the rural reservation that spans about 4,000 square miles in southwestern South Dakota. The theater will begin showing 2 movies each week on Thursdays and Mondays. The Seneca Nation, whose 3 western New York casinos make it one of the region's largest employers, will elect a new president on November 6th from among 6 candidates. The winner's reach will extend beyond the 8,000-member tribe to Albany, where Seneca leaders have clashed frequently with state government over matters of finance and freedoms, including the perennial state's efforts to tax cigarette sales at tribal smoke shops. The new president will step in amid a standoff with New York over gambling rights that has stalled the Seneca payment of $460 million in casino proceeds to the state and city officials of Buffalo, Niagara Falls, and Salamanca. The Seneca say the state's installation of slot machines at nearby race tracks violates a 2002 compact promising the Seneca's exclusive casino rights in exchange for handing over 25% of those slot machine revenues. A federal judge last week denied an emergency order sought by a group of American Indians who wanted to force officials to provide satellite voting on Montana reservations, effectively putting off resolution of the issue until after Election Day. 15 American Indians from the remote Crow, Northern Cheyenne, and Fort Belknap reservations, some who had to drive 125 miles to vote, argued in a lawsuit filed earlier this month that the distances that they must drive for early voting and late registration leaves them disadvantaged compared to white voters. But U.S. District Judge Richard Siebel said regardless of whether voting discrimination exists, the plaintiffs did not show that they were unable to vote for the candidates of their choice. A tribal newspaper in Arizona is publishing a detailed voter guide for the first time ever. New Mexico Pueblo is sending kindergartners home with get out the vote buttons for their parents. Tribes in Wisconsin are reaching out to young adults with Rock the Vote events and Powwow the Vote events. Native American communities nationwide are working hard to tap some 3 million Native American voters, hoping to turn around a low voter participation that has persisted in Indian country for decades. The push is being headed by the National Congress of American Indians, the largest group representing Native Americans, which calls the low turnout a civic emergency, fueled by everything from language barriers and vast distances between polling places to high unemployment and poverty. The National Congress of American Indians and its partners are focusing on 18 states with high Indian populations, and their efforts are not without challenge. The NCAI said recently in a report that voter ID laws could negatively affect participation this year in Native America and Alaska Native communities in 10 states: Alaska, Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Michigan, Montana, North Dakota, Oklahoma, South Dakota, and Washington. For example, in Alaska and Florida, tribal IDs are not listed as acceptable forms of identification at the polls. In other states, address requirements pose difficulty for those tribal communities that lack street addresses. In Montana, Indians from the remote Crow, Northern Cheyenne, and Fort Belknap reservations sought an emergency order for satellite voting that was turned down. These things put them at a disadvantage compared with white voters. A federal judge denied their request last week. The NCAA is pushing this year for the largest Native vote in history, but experts agree achieving a high turnout will be difficult. And just to see how things might end up, we go to 5:38 for a quick view of polling results, and then to Mark Trahant, Shoshone Bannock, for his prediction on the election outcome. Thanks for joining with us, Mark. Trahant, Fort Hall, Idaho today, is my understanding, is where you're at. And since most people think that you're the most knowledgeable Native American here in the United States on this presidential election stuff, because you study it night and day and in your sleep, give us your best prediction of what's going to happen on Tuesday, November 6th.
Well, first, I should say my family is the one that's bearing the price for all of this. They're tired of having no other channels except those with political information. They'd like to see some real TV again.
I can understand that.
I think it's going to be close, but I think there's a really good chance for the president to be reelected, and I think there's a really good chance for the Democrats to hold on to the Senate. The one thing that I'm even more certain about is that the Republicans do not have the votes to repeal the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, and with it, the Indian Health Care Improvement Act. They would need to have in the Senate a supermajority of 60 votes. There's no way that's going to happen. They could take some of the parts of the law out, budgetary, through a process called reconciliation, but that requires 50 votes, and I don't think they're going to get 50 votes. I think the Senate is going to stay in Democratic hands.
How early do you think we're going to know the end result of this voting tomorrow? Ohio is part of that East Coast batch of things. Are we going to have anything to peg our forecast on by early evening?
Well, and to make it even more complicated, Ohio is the latest closing poll in the East Coast. So you'll have a lot of eastern states closing before Ohio. Even Florida, which is partly in the central time zone, closes before Ohio.
Okay.
If it's close, we may not know about Ohio for a while. In fact, if it's close and has to recount, we might not know the results of the election for a while because Ohio law requires a recount to begin after the election certified, which could take some time given the closeness of it. There are things to watch for, though. I think New Hampshire's a good bellwether. If Obama wins New Hampshire, that's probably a good sign for him. Conversely, if Romney wins it, it shows that he's still in the game.
If Obama picks up Virginia, is that going to be something that tells us it might be over 2, depending on the combination?
Yeah, if Obama wins Virginia or Florida, you can pretty much start writing an early story and have a lot more time to celebrate if that's your inclination.
See any surprises in this thing anywhere?
I think the closeness races in Montana and North Dakota in the Senate, where the native vote has certainly been important. The Republicans really should have had a clear shot to both of those seats. And right now, at least, they look awfully close with the Democrats favored.
You're going to be doing some massive generation of information from around Indian country. Where can we watch you while you do that?
Tomorrow I'll be live tweeting. I'll be everywhere. Indian Country Today will have regular updates. One thing I really want to do is get people who are having parties across the country to send me both comments and pictures from where they're having one. And tell you where this idea came from. Seattle, for years, has had a really great Native Vote get-together where they rent a big suite in the Westin Hotel in Seattle. And it's a lot of fun. And I was thinking, what if we could tie the whole country together and have people sharing those conversations from across the country?
Indeed. Let's try to do that, and be happy to give you a call sometime and maybe get ready for Wednesday's news as those results come in.
Sounds good to me.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for joining with us. We'll do it again.
Good.
And that is going to be another roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of Native News Update. We want to say wawanan for joining with us and come back again soon.